Welcome back to Consider This. I'm Melisa, Idris, with me Sharaad, Kuttan and Faroze Nadar from Global Compact Network Malaysia. So just before the break, we're talking about the financial lens that businesses measure everything or see everything through. And I'm thinking about investors, right? Especially for public listed companies. Because of the short-termism of investors looking at P&L for every quarter, it becomes difficult for businesses to invest, as you said, into sustainable practices. When you're talking to businesses, how do you help them navigate this?
Right. So they say there's two sides to everything.
Sure.
So for us at the Global Compact, we see this as a great opportunity as well. The whole DNA of a company that's fiscally driven, right? So recently we've launched a platform, an action platform called the Sustainable Financing Platform, in which we want to motivate and influence the entire private sector to pivot towards being sustainable via financing instruments. So for the first time, we are trying to engage CFOs directly to come together to develop a global principle of sustainable financing from a non-financial institution perspective. The whole idea being is that when private sector makes their decisions or want to grow, they usually raise debt. It's either they borrow money or they issue their own corporate bonds and things like that. So recently at the global level, we helped Enel. Enel is like the energy company of Italy to launch something called the SDG bond. The primary difference between an SDG bond, or rather how we see it, and a green bond is that a green bond is project-driven. An SDG bond is your entire business strategy is now pivoting towards becoming more sustainable. So what Enel is saying is that we are only going to be a renewable energy company. And we are betting that we are going to be more profitable by becoming more sustainable. And they launched, and they raised about $4.5 billion from the ESG investors who have big appetite for this. And they actually priced their bond higher in market.
And there was still appetite for that.
And it was still 3 times oversubscribed. So we can take that financial narrative and turn it to our advantage if you're strategic about it.
Right. It seems very creative, and I love these kind of vanguard projects because it tells you about what the future could be like.
Yes.
But when time is ticking and the clock is ticking, as it were, on the planet, the issue for me is what is the critical mass that you need to actually make all these little types of new ways of thinking be substantial in its impact on the planet, right? So, in particular, what level of sign-up do you need in a Malaysian sense for it to have impact, on a global sense to have impact?
Yep. So, there's a very interesting chart that was making its round on the social media. There's only like 7 companies that rule the consumer world or something like that. Right? Now, this also shows that how much power they wield, sometimes independently from sovereign nations, right? I always believe that a sustainable business is a business that has profit, because the profit will reside in power. What's important is how this power is wielded, and this is driven by the corporate values of the organization. So when somebody who has large supply chains are able to influence the suppliers to become more sustainable, that is the key thrust to move forward. As much as I like to say, it has to be a bottom-up kind of thing, but because of the time crunch that we don't have the luxury of waiting for everybody to rally and we want to do. It has to be hard-hitting decisions for the guys on top saying that, look, I want all my suppliers to fall the line in this. And we don't have to look far. Look at palm. Palm oil is the perfect example of this. How has this worked out? If you look at RSPO, within a span of a decade, how much influence it has grown simply because the big buyers were saying that I want sustainable palm. Of course, I'm not going to go into the narrative that this is a trade war, blah, blah. Let's look at how sustainable the entire industry has become from what the suppliers' downstream perspective and also the upstream, because the consumers want sustainable things as well. So we have a working model. We just have to pick it and put it across the board.
So you keep using palm as an example. What's the next industry that you see may follow palm's direction?
In the Malaysian context?
Yes.
I think electronics will be the next, simply because human rights and labor is now becoming a big issue. They want to know that there's no forced labors, there's no things involved. So how is this going to take in place? Of course, manufacturing would be in that ambit. I think if you look at all the glove providers, they have been shocked recently by certain things. They would be the next in line for this. But again, I want to repeat, we always think about being sustainable as something that, we have to recreate the entire strategy. It's not. We already have success cases in the palm. Learn, adopt. Also, I think from the C-suite or even the practitioner levels, that many good things that businesses do will relate to SDGs.
Yes, yes.
There's no need to recreate.
The SDGs kind of cut across best
cut
practices across industries. I just
Exactly,
want to very
yeah.
quickly pivot to an area of the SDG, which is what I'm passionate about, which is the gender equality dimension.
Right.
Can you touch a little bit on that and how local businesses have responded
Yep.
in aligning to that dimension of the SDG?
Just before that, I just want to just say there's 4 key things that private sector needs to do in being sustainable. One, they need to decarbonize their production process for climate change issues. The second is you've got to ensure decent work for all. Third is ensuring what do you call this, gender equality. And third is good governance and ethics. Because studies have shown if there is gender equality within the private sector, the GDP growth is already substantial, right? So right now, the private sector, the way I see it, is depending on the regulation that they must 30% quota, kind of things. So they are pivoting towards on things like that. But I think beyond that, we also need to understand what are the underlying baselines from a gender equality perspective that private sector needs to embark on. So for Global Compact, a number of years ago, we've launched something called the Women Empowerment Principles, WEP, which is quite a comprehensive baselining assessment for private sector to self-assess, to say that, oh, we have gap here, gap here, gap here. This is how we can close the gap.
Okay.
So we have this methodology and tools that private sectors can use for free. But the most important thing is that it has to be a strategic agenda.
Gender-wise, how's Global Compact itself as an organization? How's it doing?
So our ED is a lady. We have a number of senior ladies.
This is at the UN level, yes.
At Malaysia, our chair is a lady, right? So we are also looking at the 30% quota as well. So we want to promote these kind of things. In fact, what we want to work with our local partners is how do we drive gender equality within our members, right? It can't just be 30%. It must be beyond that. Sure. So we want to now deploy our methodologies across the board so that they can use it as baselining, gap analysis, and how do they move forward on this.
All right. Yeah. Well, in the last minute that we have left, earlier you mentioned that the goal for 2020 is to double the number of companies involved with the Global Compact Network Malaysia. How exactly are you going to achieve this? Because we're going to hold you to it and call you back on the show.
No, I think at the end of the day, private sector want to ask, why should I be part of this? What's in it for me? So we are now strengthening what we are giving for our members. Of course, taking cue what we're doing globally. Locally, we are now deploying several digital tools that members can use to enhance their sustainability journey. I think another important thing is we also want to create a few Malaysian champions that can contribute the Malaysian voice to this global narrative. It's always a very global not thing. It's not wrong, but I think in the century, which they're saying is our century, it's time for us to step on the plate and say, this is how we should also do this kind of things. So we're working with a few potential Malaysian champions in this space as well.
All right. Yeah. Well, that's all the time we have on Consider This for this episode. Thank you so much, Faroze, for being on the show. I'm Melisa Idris, signing off with me, Sharaad, Kuttan. We will be back same time tomorrow, 10 p.m. for another episode of Consider This. Thank you for watching and good night.